I'll never forget that Friday night. Just my sister Danielle and me, home alone while our parents were out. I was 12, she was 13. We lived in a modest, average-sized house, but the layout made it strangely easy to hear everything, like how a conversation in the den downstairs could echo all the way up to the top floor. Every creak, every footstep, every whisper traveled. That night, we were in our own rooms upstairs, doing our usual stuff. The house was quiet in that way only a late evening can be. Comforting at first, but gradually pressing in with the kind of silence that feels too still. Then I heard it. A soft, deliberate tapping, faint but persistent. It was coming from downstairs, from the den. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured it had to be Danielle messing around. Maybe she'd gone downstairs and was trying to get my attention. But the sound didn't feel playful. It was steady, measured. Tap, tap, tap. Curious and a little uneasy, I headed down to the den. The moment I stepped into the room, I felt it. The air was heavier somehow, cooler. The den faced the backyard, and the only light came from the faint glow of a street lamp filtering through the curtain. Outside, it was pitch black, the kind of dark where you can barely make out shapes beyond the glass. I flicked on the porch light and froze. It wasn't Danielle. There, standing just on the other side of the glass door, was a man I had never seen before. Mid-40s maybe, tall, at least 6'1". His long black hair hung greasy and unkempt around his face, streaked with gray. His cheeks were flushed, almost unnaturally red, like he'd been out in the cold too long. Or something worse. I felt a jolt of panic surge through me. My instinct was to bolt, run, but I couldn't move. The man didn't look angry or threatening, not exactly. He just stood there, staring at me through the glass with this strange, vacant expression, almost like he was confused or desperate. There was something about the way he looked at me, like he needed help. Still rooted to the floor, I hesitantly slid open the small screen window built into the glass door, just enough to speak through. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice trembling more than I wanted it to. He leaned closer to the opening. "I need to use your phone," he said, voice raspy, almost too calm. I frowned. "Why?" I asked, glancing toward the fence that surrounded our yard. "And why are you in our backyard?" He didn't answer me, not really. He just looked straight at me, eyes dull but pleading, and said again, "Please, just let me in. I need to use your phone." The unease in my stomach sharpened into something more like fear. "No, I'm sorry," I said quickly, backing away an inch. "You need to leave, now, or I'm calling the police." I began sliding the screen shut. That's when everything shifted. In a sudden jarring motion, he jammed his arm into the open gap, blocking it. His hand groped past the screen, fingers clawing at the inside of the door. And then he started reaching farther in, feeling around for the lock. My blood went cold. The moment I screamed for my sister, the man jerked his arm back. As soon as the space cleared, I slammed the screen shut and bolted from the den, my heart hammering so hard it felt like it might burst. My bare feet thudded against the stairs as I sprinted upward, and halfway to the top, I collided with Danielle, her eyes wide, her expression pale with confusion and concern. "There's someone at the door," I gasped. He tried to get in. He was reaching inside. Without saying a word, she moved past me and crouched low, peeking through the stairwell railing that overlooked the den below. From that angle, she could see straight through to the back door. "He's still there," she whispered. Her voice was tight, thin with fear. Without hesitating, she grabbed her phone and dialed our parents. Her hands were shaking, but she managed to explain what was happening, every word clipped and urgent. Our parents told her to hang up and call the police immediately. Most importantly, they told us to stay upstairs, no matter what. So we did. We went back to our rooms, each of us shutting the door behind us, trying to stay calm, trying to feel safe. The house had gone deathly quiet. No more tapping, no more movement. Nothing but the low hum of the refrigerator downstairs and the distant tick of the hallway clock. Minutes passed, then more. It was hard to tell how long we waited. Every second stretched into forever. Eventually, the silence started to lull me into a false sense of security. The fear didn't vanish, but curiosity began to creep in behind it. And I guess, being 12 and desperate to feel brave, I convinced myself it was over, that he'd left. I needed to be sure. So, against every warning we'd just been given, I crept out of my room and made my way downstairs, moving slowly, trying not to let the old wooden steps creak too loudly beneath me. The den was dim, the only light coming from the porch bulb still glowing outside. I stepped cautiously into the room. He wasn't there. The space by the back door was empty now. No shadow, no movement, no sign of him. Relief started to settle in, light and shaky, until something caught my eye. The small window built into the sliding door. It looked off, lower than I remembered leaving it. That's when it hit me. I never closed it. I never pulled it shut after he'd yanked his arm out. And now, someone had. I stepped closer to the back door, heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. The porch light still spilled across the glass, but the den felt darker now, thicker somehow. As I scanned the room, something tugged at the edge of my vision. I turned my head left. The office door was open. My stomach dropped. I was certain it had been closed earlier, dead certain. We'd passed by it a dozen times today. It always stuck slightly when you shut it, and I remembered giving it that extra push just this afternoon. But now, it stood ajar, a sliver of black nothingness behind it. The hallway light didn't reach far into that room. Whatever was inside was swallowed by darkness. I couldn't see anything, and I wasn't going in there. No way. But I had to know. I had to see, even if just for a second. I pulled out my phone, my fingers slick with sweat. I opened the camera app, turned on the flash, and slowly raised it in front of me. My thumb hovered for a heartbeat over the capture button. Then I pressed it. Click! The flash burst like lightning, flooding the room with harsh white light for the briefest instant. And what I saw, my breath caught in my throat. The man, the same one from outside. He wasn't at the back door anymore. He was inside. Hunched over our office desk like some grotesque statue, his back crooked and still, except for his head. His head was turned all the way toward me, eyes wide, mouth slightly parted. And though I couldn't hear a sound in that flash-lit moment, every cell in my body screamed that he knew I was there, that he was about to move. I didn't wait to find out. I turned and ran, adrenaline taking full control. My feet flew over the carpet, up the stairs, 2 steps at a time. Behind me, I didn't hear him, but that made it worse. Was he chasing me? Was he still in the office? Was he already behind me? I slammed the den door shut and locked it with trembling hands. Silence. Then, tap, tap, tap. The light, familiar tapping was back, coming from the other side of the door now. I stood frozen, barely breathing, as the man's muffled voice drifted through. "Please," he begged softly, "let me in. Just open the door." I could hear the desperation in his voice, but it wasn't human. Not anymore. There was something wrong in the way he said it, like he wasn't trying to convince me, just repeating a line he'd said too many times before. I cried out for Danielle. Then, heart racing, I called through the door, bluffing hard. "The cops are here! They're downstairs!" A pause. Then silence. No more tapping. I pressed my ear against the door, straining to hear. Moments later, I caught it. The faint creak of the back door opening, then closing. He was leaving. Whether it was stupid or not to lie about the police, I'll never know. Maybe I ruined any chance they had of catching him, but maybe it saved our lives. Because the real cops didn't arrive until 5 full minutes later. This story is told from my father's point of view. Me and my girlfriend's brother, his name's Adam, had been talking about hunting for a while. He'd never been before, so I figured it was about time I took him out on a proper trip. Since it was going to be his first time, I wanted to bring him somewhere I knew he'd have a solid shot at bagging a deer. So I called up my uncle. He owns some property out in Braxton County, West Virginia. Deep country, real secluded. And I asked if we could crash at his place for the weekend. He said sure, no problem. I told him perfect, we'd be there by the evening. Adam and I packed up our gear, threw our rifles in the truck, and headed out. The drive alone made it clear just how far out we were going. This wasn't just backwoods, this was middle of nowhere territory. Miles of trees, narrow dirt roads, and that eerie stillness that starts to creep in once you're too far from civilization. We pulled into my uncle's place just as the sun was dipping behind the hills. He already had his truck running, engine humming like he was waiting on us. "Hop in," he called, leaning out the window. We climbed into the truck bed, gear and all. I leaned forward and asked where we headed. "To my hunting cabin," he said. "It's out about 10-15 miles. Didn't think much of it. Made sense. The ride was long and quiet, the forest getting thicker, darker. No cell service, no houses, not even power lines. When we finally rolled up to the cabin, well, it was a bit of a letdown. 2 rooms, tiny, old, the kind of place that looks like it might collapse if the wind picked up too hard. As soon as we unloaded our stuff, my uncle hit the gas and pulled away, waving casually from the truck window like he was dropping us off at a summer retreat. "Have fun," he shouted over the engine. And then we were alone. The sun was gone now, night was settling in fast, and as we started getting our things organized, we realized something that hadn't occurred to us before. There were no curtains on any of the windows, and no electricity either, just a couple old-fashioned lanterns. The windows stared out into complete darkness, like eyes wide open and blind. It made the whole place feel exposed, naked. Neither of us liked it. We didn't say much, just quietly pulled some clothes from our bags and hung them up over the windows to block the view, or to block whatever might be looking in. After that, we climbed into bed, still a little unsettled, but trying to ignore it. The air was cold and damp, the only sound the occasional creak of the old cabin wood. But it didn't stay quiet for long. Just a few minutes after we lay down, there was a noise outside. Metal, clanging like garbage cans being smashed together. Adam stiffened instantly. I could hear it in his voice, tight, nervous. What the hell was that? I tried to play it cool, even though my pulse had picked up too. "Probably just a bear or something," I muttered. "Don't worry about it. Go back to sleep." He didn't reply. Then I added, joking, but also dead serious, "Don't wake me up unless the cabin's on fire." Eventually, I started to drift off. The steady rhythm of the night, the creaking wood, the low hiss of the lantern lulled me into sleep. At least until Adam shook me awake. "Cliff, Cliff, wake up!" he whispered urgently, his voice trembling. I groaned, half-conscious. "What?" "There's someone outside." I mumbled, eyes still closed. "No, go back to sleep. There's no one." Then I stopped mid-sentence, because just on the other side of the wall, right next to where Adam's bed was, I heard it. A sound. Not just a knock or a footstep. A scraping. Slow, deliberate, and sickeningly long. Like fingernails or claws raking down the outer wood of the cabin, starting from the far corner and dragging all the way across the wall. The noise ended right beneath one of the covered windows, and then it was followed by something worse. Tapping. Delicate, rhythmic, as if something was lightly pressing its fingers against the glass, testing it. Tap, tap, tap. Neither of us moved. We just lay there, frozen, staring up into the dark, too afraid to even breathe too loudly. The thin fabric we'd hung over the window shifted slightly with the draft, but we didn't dare touch it. We didn't want to know what was outside, didn't want to see what might be staring in. I finally broke the silence. "Load your gun," I whispered. He didn't respond with words, just reached quietly for his rifle, the soft click of the bolt sliding back, barely audible. I did the same. We didn't sleep, not a single second. We just sat there, backs pressed against the wall, eyes locked on the window we couldn't see through, waiting and listening. The tapping didn't return, but the silence that followed was somehow even worse. The kind that wraps around your neck and waits. When the sun finally started to rise and the first gray light crept in through the trees, we didn't speak a word. We just gathered our things and got out of there. Later that morning, We drove back to my uncle's place and asked him straight out, "Were you messing with us last night, trying to scare us or something?" He looked genuinely confused. "What are you talking about?" I pressed further, but his expression didn't change. He had no idea what we were talking about. No one else was out there. No one should have been anywhere near that cabin. To this day, Adam and I don't know what was outside that night. But whatever it wasn't human. According to the author, my son, the photo attached to this story was one his great-uncle took before driving off that evening. In the background, you can see the cabin, small, isolated, and now, to me, cursed. I never went back. I was 19 at the time, working at a rundown, sketchy motel, the kind of place you wouldn't stay in unless you absolutely had to. The building was falling apart. Everything smelled faintly of mildew and stale cigarettes, and most of the guests were locals, the type of people who were always up to something they definitely shouldn't have been doing. Let's just say the cops showed up a lot, a few times a week at least. I worked both behind the front desk, checking in these creeps at all hours of the night, and as a housekeeper. That meant after dealing with them face to face, I also got the pleasure of cleaning up their disgusting, vomit-soaked rooms. It was about as glamorous as it sounds. One afternoon, I was doing housekeeping duty in the second building of the motel. It was tucked way out in the back, the farthest section from the main office. I hated working back there. The rooms were even more beat up than the ones in the front, and the whole building was usually deserted, way too quiet. The kind of quiet that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels off. I just wanted to finish up for the day. I had one of my last rooms to clean, and I was rushing through it, trying to beat the evening. The room itself was filthy, same as usual, but nothing out of the ordinary at first. I was in the bathroom, wiping down the mirror, when I saw something that made my stomach drop. A man, standing directly behind me. His face stared back at me from the reflection in the glass. Mid-50s maybe, filthy skin, long, stringy, greasy hair hanging past his shoulders. He looked like he hadn't bathed in weeks. I screamed. I spun around so fast my knees nearly gave out. "Oh my God," I shouted, my heart thundering in my chest. "You scared the hell out of me." But what really made my skin crawl was that this room, it was supposed to be vacant. No one had checked in. No one should have been there. Certainly not this strange, silent man watching me clean from inside a room that should have been completely empty. Thing is, we just had a meeting a few days earlier about customer satisfaction. One of those awkward, forced workplace gatherings where the boss stood at the front of the room lecturing us about being more accommodating. He really laid it on thick, pressuring everyone to go out of their way to be polite, helpful, and friendly, no matter how weird or unpleasant the guests were. So, with my heart still pounding in my chest and this grimy stranger silently staring at me, I swallowed hard and forced myself to speak. "Sir?" I asked, my voice a tight whisper. "Can I get you anything? Towels?" The man didn't answer. He just stared back at me with a crooked, unsettling grin. Then, slowly, he lifted both hands and held them out toward me. At first, I thought maybe he was handing me a tip, some crumpled cash for cleaning his room earlier. But then I looked down. $100 bill, Crisp, unfolded, clean. And that's when the alarm bells started going off in my head. No one tips $100, not on a $40 a night room, not here, not at this sketchy, half-abandoned motel. Something was wrong. The man kept smiling, lips stretched thin and unnatural, and said, "Name's Terry." His voice was rough, like sandpaper soaked in whiskey. "I'm staying in the room next door with my wife, Sherry," he added, chuckling to himself. "Cute, right? Terry and Sherry?" The laugh was low and wheezing, and I caught a whiff of him. Car oil and cheap liquor thick in the air between us. I tried to keep my voice steady as I asked, "Why are you, offering me this?" He didn't miss a beat. That same grin never left his face as he leaned a little closer and said, in a voice that sent a chill crawling down my spine, "Me and my wife were watching you. Thought you looked fun. We just wanted to have a little fun with you." My entire body locked up. I felt like my heart had jumped into my throat and lodged there. My mouth was suddenly dry. No," I stammered. "I can't do that, sir. I'm sorry." Every part of me wanted to bolt, to shove past him and sprint out of the room. But I couldn't. He was still blocking the door, my only way out. Terry kept smiling, but his expression softened a bit, like he was trying to reel me in. He dropped his voice to something calmer, more coaxing. "Come on, just come meet my wife. You'll like her. Just to talk. We're friendly people." I shook my head, forcing a nervous, thin smile. "I really can't. I've got a lot of rooms left to clean today." He watched me for another long, silent moment. I prayed, actually prayed for him to just go away, for something to pull him out of that room and out of my line of sight. And finally, he left. Without another word, he turned and walked out, disappearing into the hallway like nothing had happened. But everything in me knew that something had. He grunted something under his breath and turned, walking off in what I assumed was the direction of his room. But I didn't move. My mind was spinning. There's no wife. I knew it. That grin, the way he blocked the door, the $100 bill. It wasn't some weird joke. It was a trap. A cold realization settled in. This man might be trying to kidnap me. And the worst part, at the time I was maybe 110 pounds. I wasn't strong. I wasn't fast. He could have easily overpowered me. I slammed the door shut and locked it from the inside, heart pounding so hard I thought it might shake the walls. I rushed straight to the phone mounted on the nightstand to call the front desk, my manager, anyone. But when I picked up the receiver, nothing. No dial tone. Just dead air. My stomach twisted. Adrenaline surged through me, drowning out logic. I knew I wasn't supposed to panic. We were trained for emergencies. Keep calm, call security, follow the procedure. But this wasn't in the handbook. Did he cut the line? No. I tried to reassure myself. This is a crappy motel. Stuff breaks all the time. It's probably just another busted phone. Still, the panic wouldn't ease. I just had to get out. Get away from that man, from this whole silent building tucked away behind the office. Then I remembered my cell phone. I'd left it on my housekeeping cart outside the room, next to the door. But to get to it, I'd have to unlock and open that door again and step out there. I hesitated. Every instinct screamed at me to stay put, but I couldn't. I couldn't sit there and wait to find out what Terry was planning. I crept toward the door, unlocked it slowly, and eased it open just a crack. I leaned out and scanned the walkway. Nothing. The hallway was empty, still. I stepped out fast and started rifling through the cart for my phone. But it wasn't there. Not in the towels, not in the side pouch, not under the cleaning clipboard. I was wasting too much time. The dread was rising like water in my throat. My hands were shaking too hard to think clearly. I didn't know where the phone had gone, but I couldn't stay. I made the decision in a heartbeat. Run. I turned and bolted down the walkway, heart hammering, feet slapping the concrete. My goal was the office, the front desk. If I could just get there, I'd be safe. I could lock the door, call for help, hide, something, anything. Then I heard it, behind me. "She's running! She's getting away!" It was him, Terry, but this time he wasn't alone. He was screaming to someone else. Then came the sound of footsteps slamming against the pavement, heavy, fast. They were chasing me. My blood turned to ice. I rounded the corner, gasping, and spotted the utility door to one of the stockrooms. I skidded to a stop, yanked out my key card with trembling fingers, swiped it, and shoved myself inside, slamming the door shut behind me. Click. I locked it. Deadbolt. The air inside was stale and smelled like chemicals and old linens, but it felt like the safest place in the world compared to out there. And then, from just beyond the thin walls, I heard them. Terry and someone else, running, searching, calling out for me. I stayed locked inside that stockroom for what felt like an eternity. 30 full minutes, maybe more. Curled up on the cold tile floor, hands wrapped around my knees, body shaking uncontrollably. Every sound made me flinch. Every distant footstep or creak made my breath catch in my throat. But eventually, it stopped. The voices, the footsteps, the sound of their shoes pounding across the pavement. Gone. The silence returned, thick and still, but this time, it wasn't comforting. It felt like the air itself was holding its breath. Finally, after convincing myself I couldn't hear them anymore, I summoned what little courage I had left. My legs barely worked. My whole body was trembling as I unlocked the door and slipped out into the corridor, half expecting to see him, or them, standing there. But there was no one. The walk to the front office was the longest stretch of ground I've ever crossed in my life. Every shadow felt alive. Every door I passed felt like it might swing open. But I made it. I stumbled through the lobby doors and collapsed into my boss's arms. I couldn't even speak right away, just sobbed uncontrollably, trying to get the words out through gasps. He called the police immediately. By the time they arrived, Terry and whoever had been with him were already gone, peeled out of the lot like cowards. But the damage was done. I was completely shaken, numb from the inside out. Later, when the police ran a background check, they told me something that made everything 10 times worse. This wasn't the first time. He'd done this before. He was wanted for sexual assault, gross sexual imposition, and, worst of all, had previously been charged with rape. I felt sick, like I'd just barely slipped out of something horrific, something I might not have survived. A few weeks later, on what happened to be my birthday, the police finally caught him. They didn't give me many details, just confirmed that he'd been arrested. That should have brought me closure, relief at least. But it didn't. Because the fear doesn't leave you just because the danger's gone. It stays. It creeps into quiet moments, into late nights, into shadows that shouldn't scare you, but still do. A few weeks after that, I quit. I packed up my things, handed in my key, and walked away from that motel for good. And I made myself a promise that day. I will never, ever work at another motel again. Not after what happened there. Not after him.